Is the coronavirus one of the plagues prophesied in the Bible? Is this one of the signs of the end of the world, the end times as it's described in the Bible? There's a lot of talk on the internet at the moment about the coronavirus, COVID-19, being one of the things that Jesus prophesied about being a sign of the end of the world, the end times. For example, in Luke chapter 21, verse 11, Jesus said there will be great earthquakes and in various places famines and pestilences, and it's seen that COVID-19 is a pestilence. And then there will be terrors and great signs from heaven. So is that prophecy something that is applicable today? It certainly seems it, doesn't it? It seems like that prophecy is eerily familiar with what we're facing now with COVID-19. But before we rush off to Twitter and make something as a post that we might later regret, it would be wise to consider the age-old principles, the time-proven principles for understanding the Bible, especially Bible prophecy, because down through the ages, many people have made certain claims about what the Bible supposedly prophesies by putting their own interpretation into it, only to be proven to be very, very wrong. Firstly, when interpreting Bible prophecy, we have to consider that it was written to someone, written or given directly to someone. In fact, this is not just a principle of Bible prophecy. This is a principle for how we should interpret the Bible itself. There are just certain scriptures that we can't take as our own. For example, 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 13. It would be very, very difficult for any one of us to claim that we have to obey every verse in the Bible when that verse is clearly written to someone, and that to someone is not us. It was written to someone who had the opportunity to fulfill and obey what the Apostle Paul was requesting, and that was to bring his cloak and parchments and books and things to him while he was in prison. None of us can do that today. So we have to understand that the Bible, and particularly Bible prophecy, was written to someone, not for everyone. Secondly, the Bible has very, very clear, often very, very clear time frame references. In fact, this is what makes them so powerful. One of the proofs of its divine inspiration is its time frame references that are given. For example, in Luke 21, that we just read that verse out of, and the parallel passage in Mark 13 and in Matthew chapter 24, we see in Matthew 24 verse 34, Christ gives the clearest time frame reference for the fulfillment of everything he is saying in Matthew 24 and partly 25, which is called the Olivet Discourse. And this Olivet Discourse, Jesus said, "Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things are fulfilled." That's a very, very clear time frame reference. A generation in the Bible was 40 years. And Jesus is speaking this around about 29, 30 AD or so. Thirdly, all Bible prophecies have an intended fulfillment. They can't be seen to have multiple fulfillments, making them vague and almost meaningless and pointless. For example, Isaiah 7:14, "Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear child." Now, some people say, well, that had multiple fulfillments. After all, Isaiah's wife fulfilled it, and then later on, Mary, the mother of Jesus, fulfilled it. There is a problem with that, and the problem is that there's a great likelihood, almost a certainty, that Isaiah's wife was not a virgin. And I know that some people will point to the Hebrew word, saying that word Beulah can mean a young woman, and it can't, except that in Matthew chapter 1, it writes the Hebrew into Greek, and it uses the precise word for virgin, and it attributes the fulfillment of that prophecy in Isaiah to Mary, the mother of Jesus, thus showing us that its intention was Mary, the mother of Jesus, who would be the virgin who would conceive. Should we think that there will be other virgins who will conceive messiahs? No, because that prophecy, as all prophecy has in the Bible, an intended fulfillment. So when we apply just these three principles of how we interpret Bible prophecy, we can see, firstly, that Jesus was speaking to someone. He was speaking to the generation of his day, the generation of that day, around AD 30. He said, this generation will not pass away. So a generation, 40 years. So these things will be fulfilled by 70 AD. AD 70, these things will be fulfilled, is essentially what he is saying. We can see historically that these things were fulfilled. In fact, every one of them was fulfilled. The temple was destroyed. Jerusalem experienced unprecedented earthquakes. There was famine. There was pestilence. There was many people dying. There was terror. There was great tribulation happening. Everything Jesus said that would happen within that time period happened. The reason we don't know this is generally because we don't know that much about history. And when we understand this, we can see it had an intended audience, a particular audience. It had a specific time frame for its fulfillment, and also it had the audience that it was given to understood that it was to be fulfilled within their time. So we see time frame, location, all fulfilled, and we can see that in history. Now, just because a prophecy's been fulfilled, just because we see that any verse of Scripture or any book of Scripture was written to someone, such as the epistle to the Ephesians or the epistle to the Colossians or the epistles to 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy. They were written to someone. That doesn't mean that there's no practical application for us today. In fact, this is the second principle that we should know when we're looking at any Scripture. While Scripture may not have been written to us, it was written for us. And now this is critically important because that means the principles contained within 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, in the epistle to the Romans are applicable to us in the sense that we can apply them. That's what applicable means. We can apply these principles. We can see that when Paul says, therefore, I beseech you, brethren, present your bodies as a living sacrifice, Romans 12:1. That applies to us today. Even though it was written to the Romans, we apply that as written for us as well. But when we are reading prophecy, we need to be very careful because it was written to someone with an intended time frame and it had an intended fulfillment. And that almost certainly has to be taken into consideration when we look at prophecy such as Luke 21 verse 11, which prophesies pestilence in the last days. Because even that expression, last days, we think it means the last days of planet Earth, when in fact it almost certainly, in context, means the last days of the temple age or the old covenant age. Hebrews 8:13, the writer to the Hebrews says, at the death of Christ, the cross made the old covenant obsolete. But that's only half the verse. The next half of the verse, written in about 63 AD, says this, and what has been made obsolete is about to be done away with. It's about to be done away with. The old covenant had been made obsolete at the cross, and it was about to be done away with. And indeed it was. All the elements of the old covenant were done away with when the Romans invaded after the siege of Jerusalem, which began in 66 AD. It ended in 70 AD. That's 3.5 years of great tribulation for Jerusalem, in which Josephus and others describe that thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people died during the siege of Jerusalem. At one point, they were throwing 600 dead bodies over the wall of Jerusalem every day. That's how many people were dying from the famine and the pestilence and the Roman army's bombardment of the city. Ultimately, in 70 AD, General Titus, who became, or was by this time, the co-emperor of Rome, was able to break through the walls, destroy the temple, and massacre the remaining inhabitants. It's a cruel part of Jewish history. But this is what Christ foretold in Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21. Clear time frame, clear intended fulfillment, it's happened. So how should we respond to something like the COVID-19 virus pandemic today? It's an act of Christian love to do what we can to firstly not spread it. Social distancing is the least thing we can do to love our neighbour as ourself. It's also something where Christian medical workers, health workers, are going into the famine. They're going into the pestilence. They're going into the plague. They're going in to the darkest places on the planet right now. And we should pray for them because they are Christ's hands and feet ministering to those who are suffering and in many cases even dying. This should be our response, not going on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter with endless speculation that serves no purpose. And this is why I think we need to be very, very careful when we're claiming something fulfills Bible prophecy. I'm Andrew Corbett. For more information about Bible prophecy, and particularly the book of Revelation, go to my website, andrewcorbett.net. You'll see there's about 10, 15 years or so worth of articles on the book of Revelation, Matthew 24, and most of the big picture Bible prophecies there. Got any comments? Leave them there. Be nice. See you next time.